Welcome to Dot Social, the first podcast to explore the world of decentralized social media, also known as the Fediverse. Each episode, host Mike McHugh talks to a leader in this movement, someone who sees the Fediverse's tremendous potential and understands that this could be the internet's next significant shift. One person who believes fervently in this future is the BBC's Forrester. As the senior Firestarter in the organization's R&D lab, Ian susses out new technologies and opportunities so that the public service broadcaster can stay current and true to its values. Among its values is trust, so the chance to verify its own journalists and run a social media server according to its own rules is a big reason for the BBC to even swim in these waters. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
I am curious about your title, Senior Firestarter. I think that is a title that I would love to have. Tell me more about that. What do you do as Senior Firestarter at the BBC?
You know, colleagues in the past have really do not like that title, but ultimately there was a decision made in BBC R&D because a lot of people were complaining about the titles and they didn't really match what they did. And so the head of R&D at the time said, hey, you know what? Call yourself whatever you want. And so I call myself the Senior Firestarter. And most of my colleagues kind of just went, I'll just stick with the title that I've been given. Well, I just kind of went, you know what? I'm sticking with this. This makes sense for me. So I guess my main role in R&D is to kind of bring ideas forward, but not just the idea, but actually develop the idea, move things forward, build prototypes, work on prototypes, collaborate with others. And I think the key thing for why I say the Firestarter, there's actually a book called The Firestarters, which is well worth reading. It's about kind of starting the idea, moving it to a point where someone else takes it on rather than you follow it all the way through. Because once you follow it all the way through, then another idea or another opportunity comes up and you don't have the resource and time to do that. So it suits certain people over other people. Some people like to follow a project all the way through. Some people like to kind of manage a project once it's going right to the end. I like the bit where it's kind of the inception of the idea right through to the point of, right, okay, now I've handed it over for somebody else who wants to kind of take it on and sees the benefit of it.
That sounds like a fantastic job. How long have you been doing this?
Oh, geez. I've been at the BBC coming up to 20 years, which is...
Wow.
Scares me. It absolutely scares me because I'm actually quite young. But I've been in R&D for, I think, about 13 years. Mm-hmm. So I never started in R&D. I used to run a project called BBC Backstage, which was a developer network for the BBC, which will probably get a little bit, you'll understand why I got this technical knowledge, even though I'm actually trained as a designer, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. So I kind of bring both sides together. And so, yeah, I just that's kind of that interest in the technology, but also an understanding about people, a bit of psychology, but also the design and how this actually fits into people's lives. Is to kind of, more of a kind of service designer, I guess, if you use his old words. They're probably out of date now. But that whole thing is the way I think.
Well, that kind of design, I think, is incredibly important. A lot of people, I think, don't realize that great design has a lot more to do than, how something looks. It's really about the whole system and how it fits in. And I think that point you mentioned, that lens that you bring when you look at the work that you're doing in on the Fediverse and with Mastodon, when you look at the experiments you've done so far with the BBC and your team, what have you learned so far?
So I'll just be very clear that I'm one of many people who in R&D and I mean, in the wider BBC, to be fair, which have been always kind of interested um, in kind of decentralized, kind of standard based, kind of social networks and other kind of networks around this stuff. But so I would say that one of the things that kind of really, we all kind of experience this, right? Is when we were using Twitter for a long, long time, and we still use Twitter, or sorry, X Twitter. Sorry, I now call it, and we use other social networks, as well. But it became very clear that the algorithms and the systems that are in place tend to drive certain content, drive certain opinions, and it's not even like one opinion. It's very much like depending on who the people are, and so from a public service point of view, it becomes very difficult to work with those platforms. So let's just take something like TikTok. TikTok has its own algorithm, right? So if you start putting stuff on TikTok, it might get to your people, it might not. It might kind of be right next to a bunch of content which is not, or just kind of almost like the very much, the opposite of what the BBC is all about. So it made sense that, so in the past it's always been very much like have your own platform, which we do, but also go to where the people are. And so the decentralized, standard base, Activity Pub, Fediverse, these kind of systems allowed us to have a third place. And it's a third place that we're still exploring. It's still kind of like quite raw. We're still picking things up, but it makes sense that we can reach people, but it's still under our kind of rules, not our rules, our kind of our values, I would say. And I think that's really important. That's something that we're exploring.
Mm-hmm. And you've created an instance as part of this. And when you look at that, do you think that at some point it might make sense to have the journalists at the BBC on that instance? Is that part of the thinking?
So I think that's something that we've talked about. There are some of the accounts are run by some of the journalists. Originally it was kind of like we could just post what we would post on X Twitter onto Mastodon, but there's an appetite now that actually we could do much more. There's a lot more characters that we can play with, but also the responses we're getting, and I think that's a really surprising thing, is the responses we're getting are just incredible in comparison to what we were getting on. And I'm using X Twitter because it's an easy comparison right now, but on other platforms as well, we're getting really powerful responses. So the journalists would like to respond, but there's some difficulty with that, and that's something that we are kind of thinking about, and how that works and how to do that in an effective and sustainable way. But the ambition is that, ultimately you could expect a lot more of our journalists and other organizations, because I realize we're talking to a worldwide audience, and BBC is very known for news, but we do a lot more than news. And so there'll be a lot more that we could do through this medium. But the amazing thing for us was always that they're all verified. They're all coming from the BBC. They're not coming from an organization where they're like, oh, you need to pay us for a check mark. There's like these are automatically verified because they're coming from the BBC domain. That is something that is just unbelievable. And to think about it, there hasn't been much of that before. Going back to that kind of, you're either on their platform or on your own platform,
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful point. The opportunity to have the BBC verify their journalists, right? And that is, it's independent, it transformed, or it's transcendent above any other platform, right? It is not a platform specific thing that you have to do with each and every platform. And that, I think, is a really great opportunity. The sense of identity in the social web, right? Who is this person really?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think identity. Yeah, so I work in BBC advisory and R&D, and identity is always a consistent theme. How do you know that person who you're talking to, or that person that you're getting that information from, is actually from, or the person who you think they are? And that's really important, especially as we go into a world where there are millions of chatbots, or try and pretend to be different people, we have got initiatives on dis and misinformation, including a project called Project Origin, which is part of this thing with Microsoft, Adobe, and other partners. I think trust is critical, and to be fair, one of the things in our values and our charter is about trust. And so it makes sense that we want to be able to verify this definitely came from the BBC, because we're proud that they came from the BBC.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I hear folks mention the experience that The Guardian had on the Fediverse, and they ultimately decided to shut it down, and the experimentation they were doing there. Now, I think the difference, though, between what The Guardian was doing, and please fill me in on this, versus what the BBC is experimenting with, is the idea that you're creating a place where your journalists could post from, but you're not necessarily opening up that instance for users to join. Is that? Do you think that's the difference?
Yeah, I think so. We have no plans to open it up to the general public. We want to be part of the ecosystem. We don't want we don't want to basically build our own platform where you must come and become part of this. And I say that loosely because there are thoughts about how we could do that in a different way. So I think in the traditional way, and we follow a lot of these different stories. So I kind of forgotten what The Guardian did exactly. But one of the things that we're really interested in is that where you could almost enable an instance which is very local. So this is some of the work that Public Spaces in the Netherlands have done with this thing called Pub Hubs, but also what Ethan Zuckerman has done in Amherst in America. It just kind of very super local, almost like replacements for Facebook groups, very small groups. And that kind of thing is very powerful.
I think that you're onto something big there. That concept of creating these like micro communities that are well managed and connected to your journalists, connected to the content that you guys produce. That's a really big opportunity.
Well, I don't think it's just a big opportunity. I think I do feel personally that could be the way forward, because for a lot of people, Mastodon's this new thing, and it's not, and we all know that, but it's obviously got a lot of notoriety when Twitter started to implode, but there was a lot of questions about how do you moderate? How can you moderate without a whole team of people moderating? Well, let's change the question. Let's not have one instance that's got everybody on it. Let's have lots of instances with different rule sets, different moderators, and I know that I remember writing about this, and not only for myself publicly, but also, so I'm one of the people that also helped write about Mastodon in the early days internally, is that, that notion of actually, it's great to have this ecosystem of different servers, different instances, different rule sets, so yeah, it's very clear. Okay, this is this instance. This instance has these rules. These rules. So, for example, scholar.social has got very different rules from. I can't even think of some of the kind of the wild and I'd say wild and fun kind of instances that you can get out there. But it does. I do recognize, and I know that they've changed it now, where when people are faced with that many instances and they have to read, it's like reading the terms and conditions, right? I'm one of the people that do read the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
Most people do not. They just want to click and go, my friend is on Mastodon.social. I need to be on Mastodon.social. It's a waiting list. This is not any good, and they don't think about, actually, I could be on another one. I can still talk to my friend and understanding, make sure I'm on an instance which actually does talk to this one. And it's quite confusing. And I do think that whole process needs a design view on it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So is that the kind of thing that you're thinking about? Are you looking at better ways to design this kind of multi-instance experience?
I would say not at this moment, but it's something that keeps on coming back again and again. I mean, let's just say, and this is not happening, it's very clear, BBC R&D does not have the resources to do this. But imagine, so now you've got this kind of, this client, right? This client device that you have complete control over, right? You could write a client, and I mean an app, that is very, very, I don't hate the word, but simple, and allows people to just be able to do the major things that they need. As far as they're concerned, they click it, it authenticates, the rest is done,
Yeah.
It's those kind of things. Now, a lot of the clients right now are still quite complicated because they've included a lot of the features. But there's a possibility that you could write a client which is a lot more simple, as well as you could write very advanced clients. And I did like what, for example, what Castling Club are doing, where they are able to, they're using ActivityPub, but they're rendering it differently. But you don't really see the kind of the kind of social. You see some parts of the social, but not the whole thing. I think we're just opening that door, and I guess this is the kind of stuff that you're doing, right? With Flipboard, you're kind of like, hey, we could now do things that we've always been doing, but now we can do it in a standard way, and we can have loads and loads of people on it rather than having to force them onto our exact service.
Exactly. I think that the opportunity to bring these disparate servers together, these different kinds of communities that somebody has decided to join, give them one place to experience those communities, to be able to dive in when they want to in that community, but also be able to get kind of an overview of what's happening across those communities. This is definitely, I think, a solvable problem. Discord does this, of course, now. There are experiences like what we've built at Flipboard. And I think that the opportunity with the open APIs that Mastodon has with the ActivityPub, infrastructure, is that we're going to see some incredible new ways to make this happen, right? The innovation itself has been decentralized, right? And so that, I think, is incredibly exciting to see.
Yeah, I think I do. And one of the things when I was at Backstage was, once you have like standard APIs, standard feeds, stuff like that, then you start to see the innovation. Like the innovation is at the edge and at the other side, and it's like, and I think even after your demo at Fediforum, I'm actually maybe I looked at Flipboard a long time ago, but now I'm like, now it's using standard protocols, and I'm much more interested, and I can see how it kind of much more integrates into the range of different applications that I use and stuff like that. So you might have a customer at some point, not that that's persuading me, but I do think that the things that you're doing on top of the protocol is very powerful, and I could see more of that happening. I mean, there's that service that I think Darius talked about where he took an event site. I can't remember the name of it now, and he just basically added ActivityPub to it, and I started using it. I'm actually having a cheese and cocktail party at my place, and I'm like, this is great. Now no one needs to sign up on Facebook or I have to send loads of emails. It's just here's all the information. It goes out to you. It's just this is pretty much the dream. I would also just add, and this is definitely further outside of BBC R&D, but we're talking about the kind of the things that you could do, but it's something that we're interested in because we've seen it before, but we're watching it, and at least I'm watching it. Is stuff there was a whole bunch of systems that were built on top of Twitter. So, for example, there was a thing called Bubblino, but made by a guy in Liverpool, which is the next city along. And so you tweet Bubblino, and it would blow some bubbles. Very simple, right? But you imagine, other services like that, which are now built on ActivityPub. Or the other one that always gets me is a really good friend of mine, who's she's just amazing. Alex Deschamps Sansino. She created this thing called the Good Night Lamp, and it's an IoT kind of lamp. You got two of them. You got one big one, and then you have a number of smaller houses. They're lamps, really, and you put the kind of the house in one. You put the kind of house lamp, the main lamp, in the house where you were born, right, or where your parents still are, and then you take the other lamps to college, for example, or elsewhere. And so you could always kind of do this kind of
Wow.
when the lamps go out, the lights go off in the house, and it's such a simple and easy thing.
Yeah.
But she was struggling to do how would you do that over the internet without some kind of proprietary. ActivityPub would do that, and it would be it just so I imagine ActivityPub tied to devices and IoT devices is probably going to be something that will become much more interesting in times going forward. That's a guess from me, not guess. It's a educated guess from me.
Yeah. The opportunity for innovation when you start connecting people to each other and people to content and other sources via an open standard, and making that actually those connections part of the web is just mind-blowing to me. I think about my early days at Netscape, and one of the things that we worked on was RSS, right? Which was really
I still use.
Yeah, RSS is amazing, and I think of ActivityPub sometimes as two-way RSS, right? And I think critically important, very important difference is that the connection is between a person's profile and a publisher, let's say, versus a client, an RSS client, and a publisher, right? Because as soon as you change clients, you lose that connection. The beauty of the actual person being connected to that publisher for as long as they want to stay connected to that publisher is absolutely amazing, and would really, I think, if we had built that 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I think that we would be in a very different world right now, in terms of publishers and their business models and their relationships with their audiences. So it's a little bit of a do-over in some ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you're talking to someone who's I class myself as a declarative developer,
A
which
declarative developer, yeah.
yeah, XML, XSLT,
Mhm.
RSS, all of these things are like speaking my language. Yeah, I always felt that information design was like XML was like the core of that, but
Yeah.
no one else agrees with me. But I do think that you're right, and I think that pushback to kind of standards
Hmm.
is quite powerful, and I do get these questions all the time in other parts of the BBC and elsewhere. Is that well, Mastodon's only got a certain number of people, you know, is it really going to go anywhere? And I'm kind of like, well, you know, does it matter so much when the level of engagement, the ability to be able to trustedly, oh, that's not a word, but yeah, I'm going to use that word for now. The ability to like on in time with the person, what the person wants, rather than like engaging them constantly, but like it's much more of a kind of nice conversation or a good conversation. You know, I feel like that's something that we will see more of in the future because I think more and more people are backing off from this kind of like, I want it all right now. I want,
Hmm.
I'm going to give up all my stuff and I'm going to just let you contact me whenever you want.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear how a day in your life goes at the BBC from this research lab that you're in and the experimentation you're doing. Are you communicating with the business folks, the journalists, the other folks in at the BBC, and what's their reaction been to this experimentation that you guys have been doing?
So yeah, so this is where I definitely include all my colleagues. So there's definitely one person who's probably the sysadmin of it all, which is Jack, um, who's amazing. Yeah, he's done a great job. Um, we also have Tristan, who I know you've been talking to, but who's been kind of writing the kind of like the business cases and stuff like that. And then you got
Hmm.
people like myself who are just kind of like championing it, but also kind of like doing stuff like this, because they're very busy and they're very focused on what they're doing. But I think, I mean, Tristan's very good about reaching out to people internally, but sometimes we need to also reach out beyond because one of the things we definitely recognize, I think if we did this a long time ago when it first happened, we might have ended up doing some of the stuff, some of the mistakes that other organizations did. I don't think we would have ever opened it up, but we would have made some mistakes, I feel, and we're learning from the mistakes. And so we're talking to them. But also, there's other organizations like ZDF in Germany, the European Commission. There's a bunch of other instances, and we're learning from them, and we're talking with them, and I know that I mean, Jack's part of there's kind of like a Macedon instance, kind of like inner circle where they all talk about different things. But I think it's also worth reaching out and like learning about, oh, what are you doing with this problem, or oh, have you faced this problem before? It's kind of like
Yeah.
we really want to be transparent about that, and that does require time and effort, and it requires someone to do that and to think about that and think strategically about. Okay, great. Well, yes, we've done the whole. We're here. We're doing this, but what's our next steps?
Yeah.
Is our next steps fitting with others? What have they learned? What are they doing about the next step? Those kind of things are also important.
Yeah, that it does feel like we're all part of the same team sometimes to me, right? Like we're all working together, collectively sharing information, advancing different parts of the Fediverse, and it,
Well,
it, it
well,
feels
this
like we're
is
on the same team.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this is what I find interesting, is that I'll say we're a public service organization, right? And you're a
Yeah,
commercial company.
yeah,
So how does that feel for you? Because it kind of is a bit like, well, we need to get more people using Flipboard, right? And that you're doing a great job. But I'm just like, that sharing of information tends to be, very, well, we want to keep that proprietary information to ourselves. But it feels like maybe what I'm kind of thinking about is this is almost like the early days of the internet, where it was all very kind of like sharing and kind of caring.
yeah.
I think that it will continue, but I'm wondering from your point of view how that works, and are you worried about that? Sorry, I'm like turning the interview
Yeah.
on you. Sorry.
No, I think I think that the idea of being a walled garden is coming to a gradual end. And if you think back to like the early days of the web, you had AOL, CompuServe. If you wanted to be online, you had to go do a business development deal with AOL, right? They owned everything, and they controlled all the innovation. The world of online really only advanced based on how much engineering and design resources they applied to different areas, right? But when the web happened, all of that innovation got decentralized, and you saw companies, come together that are worth billions and billions of dollars. I mean, trillions of dollars of value created. We now have an infrastructure that I think is an amazing blend of companies, public interest organizations, researchers, universities, all now as part of the same collective web. And I think that, the challenge with social is that it rebuilt these walls, these proprietary experiences, very similar to what we saw with AOL. So, and it really hampered a lot of innovation. And I think by tearing down these walls, by setting up a way where the social graph isn't a proprietary thing that a company owns anymore. It's not a moat. It's not a competitive moat anymore. It is just part of the web. And now anyone who can innovate and come up with a creative, well-designed experience can win. And that's a way better way to compete. And so I think that's, you have to, as a company, you have to be willing to tear down the walls and be vulnerable and compete on the merits of your design and your product work and build something that's truly valuable. And that's, I think, easier for companies that are smaller than companies that are bigger. I think that it also can be a little scary for organizations. It's also unknown. The technology is still, new, relatively speaking. So I do think that this is an area that, the pioneers of this area are going to create something amazing. And
Mike, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. I think, well, not correct. I think it's amazing because like the thing about Flipboard was always the design, the user interface, the all of these things, and it stands out. It's been like that, from day one, and then now, being kind of shoved into a corner by all these other networks and having to like work within their kind of proprietary rules and algorithms just didn't suit what you're doing. And so now you're kind of like, well, now we can do whatever we wanted to do, which benefits us rather than try and squeeze into the space alongside a bunch of people doing whatever they're doing. I think you have the right attitude, and I think this is why, once again, having someone like myself going out and kind of relaying that back internally is something which is important because, even though we're a public service organization, we do have our own properties such as iPlayer, such as Sounds, all these things. It's like, okay, well, look, this is what Mike's doing at Flipboard. This could be a really good use case of what we should be doing or what we should be thinking about. And I think, once again, that leads to when I do talks and elsewhere, then, hey, have you checked out what Flipboard's doing? Look at this elegant design, and now they can have the freedom to do what they've always wanted to do, and also to like reach out to so many more users than having to pay Meta or whoever for like this tiny chunk of the pie. This is a long conversation about the importance of innovation on an open platform.
Right.
And I think this is kind of what we're thinking about. We're not focused purely on Mastodon. We're also looking at the others. Yeah, we're not I'm not saying we're not looking at Lemmy. When Lemmy's interesting, but there are others like Pixel Fed, as I said. But even stuff like what's it called? Bookworm.
Yeah.
Doesn't get much love.
Yeah.
But can you imagine a small reading group or small reading groups which physically meet in libraries across the UK or across the world, and their status of their reading goes into Bookworm that's only shared with the people in that circle? That's something that, could be really powerful for a public service organization who's encouraging people to look into or to read more and to explore the world more. And I think it's those kind of things that we're interested in. We have got, and I just kind of take a slight turn on so we have this kind of like this thing called Human Values, which is also an R&D project. And it's 14 values, and I've got the cards in front of me. Well, I won't get them out, but it's all open source. But one of the values is very much about helping people to explore the world. So it's not about just kind of like going and kind of like posting stuff on Bookworm, but also then sharing it with others in the smaller group of like, this is how I feel about this, and then writing stuff that, we write reviews which only that group can see, unless you then make it public, stuff like that you could do, but it would make more sense as a public service organization to enable, and to help with. I feel that that's the kind of thing that we're looking at more. Not that we're going to do that, but it's just those kind of more public service activities which match and are now possible.
Oh, that's incredibly exciting. What is your advice to other organizations like yours, other publishers, people that are creating content? What's your advice to them in terms of if they haven't started to get involved with the Fediverse yet? What do you tell them when they ask you, hey, what should I do here?
I'll go back to when I first started talking about. I started with Mastodon, right? I joined Mastodon in, I think it was 2017, right? Mm-hmm. So I was kind of an earlier one. I had some accounts on Mastodon.social, but I think the first thing is definitely to kind of put people on it so they can experience it. But then the next really important thing is to follow up and say, this is enabled by ActivityPub. Mastodon is not the Fediverse.
Right.
It's a big part of the Fediverse. I've lost track of how many numbers. Mm-hmm. It's a big part, but this is now about ActivityPub and that ability to federate. And that's quite powerful. And that enables these kind of applications. And I think, once again, you need a kind of design or kind of like you need to think about these opportunities and see them and explore them, even in just words, because then it gets people thinking, oh, I thought it was just a kind of something that could replace Twitter, which is what a lot of people and the mainstream press were pushing. This is like the Twitter alternative. And like TechCrunch and all the others were saying that, and they still do, to be fair. And yes, it could be, but it's not. It's more than that.
Right.
So I think when I sat down and actually talked to people about, the possibility of the Fediverse, which has a load of other applications, but also ActivityPub as as you said, is a two-way kind of RSS. Suddenly it was like, oh, okay, now I could see some possibilities. I can now see. I think the other thing that you demonstrated perfectly is that kind of, rather than like, please sir, can I have some more? Kind of like to all the big social networks. This is kind of like completely through them, out the other side, around them. This could literally. I know. Well, I assume the reason why Threads now will support ActivityPub and federate with them, with the rest of the Fediverse, if they like it or not, I don't know. I'm not getting into that argument. Is because the EU have kind of gone, and this also really also explains why they probably don't want to do news. But I do think that this I'm going to call it a stack for now, of like Federation, ActivityPub at the base will basically almost break up a lot of the kind of monoliths in the social media platforms.
Yeah. It's encouraging to hear someone from your vantage point saying that has been the dream for the folks who've created ActivityPub, and Eugene's created Mastodon, and to hear you saying that is, I think, incredibly exciting. I agree with you. I think this is the beginning of something really special. It's sort of the next major revolution for the web.
I'm really glad, because I remember I've been part of the indie web for quite a while, and those guys have been like scratching their own itches for ages and ages. I have known Tantech forever, a long time. Geez, probably about 2007 or something. And I remember them showing. Actually, it was Tantech that showed during this kind of hack day in the Mozilla offices in Berlin, this kind of like diagram where you could kind of like micropub and then do something else, and I was like, if this actually could work, this could be like, why would anyone use anything else? Obviously it didn't quite turn out that way, but you need those people, these fire starters, to kick forward the idea, and then others people to go, right, actually, like yourself, well, we got this. We know what we're doing. We've also had the struggle of like having to fight for time and attention on these kind of bloated platforms. So why don't we just do our own thing, do it really well, and we just kind of like don't have to, pay the platform owners anything, Yeah.
And I love the idea that these are all fire starters, all these folks, right? And this is super exciting. So how should people follow the work that you're doing? As you continue to start these fires and feed these fires, what are the best ways for people to follow you and that work?
So if they want to follow me personally, I'm pretty much Cubic Garden on almost everything. I do have a Mastodon account, obviously, which is Cubic Garden at mass.to. I also am on Black Twitter and twit.tv and twit.social, sorry, and scholar.social and a number of other ones. But if you literally go to my website, my blog, Cubic Garden, you'll find most of the stuff. I haven't blogged as much recently because I've been so busy just like doing lots of stuff like this. But I do think that you should definitely join or follow, a lot of the accounts on BBC Social. And also the R&D has an account, and the R&D account is kind of like, it's pumping out some really interesting stuff. It also, we have a blog. It also goes into a bit more detail. It has a link to the blogs and stuff like that. But there's someone actually writing that. It makes sense that as R&D, as an R&D department, we would probably put more weight behind what we put out.
I hope you do some more blog posts in the future because they're very insightful. They're very, I think they get at that idea of building something for humans, designing across the board systematically. I think some of the posts that you've had on there that I've been reading are just absolutely fantastic insights for any kind of product builder, any sort of designer. I encourage people to check out that blog and follow you on Mastodon.
There's a project which, by the time you listen to this, it'll be public, called Adaptive Podcasting, which will be open source, and it's once again, I'm now thinking about it again and going, oh, how would this work if it was infused with ActivityPub? But because it's going to be open source under Apache license, what I would love for someone to just pick it up and start running with it. It does use RSS.
That's fantastic.
So yes, I would love to see what people do with it. So, that will also be on our blog. That will be shared on Mastodon and also the other platforms as well. But that's definitely you should definitely follow BBC R&D.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, thank you so much for spending time talking about this with us. It's really exciting work that you're doing and have been doing for years now. And it was a pleasure to get to know you and hear about all that work.
Well, thank you, Mike, and it was a pleasure. I look forward to joining you on Flipboard.
Yes,
really soon.
Well, it's exciting to get a chance to talk to you about all of this, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the months ahead as we continue to advance the Fediverse together.
Yeah, I think we can do it with the others as well. I just think that it's going to be an unstoppable force, and
I agree.
In a few years' time, people will go, "Oh, remember we used to use these kind of proprietary social networks? I had to use their client."
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Well, thanks so much for listening. As Ian said, you can follow him as Cubic Garden in pretty much all the places, including his website at cubicgarden.com. Big thanks to our editors, Rosanna Caban and Anne Lay. To learn more about what Flipboard's doing in the Fediverse, sign up via the link in this episode's description. You can also follow Mike McHugh on Mastodon at mike@flipboard.social. Thanks so much and see you in the Fediverse!